90 minutes are running with a story about Tomas Soucek's contractual situation. What contractual situation? I hear you ask. Well, maybe I didn't hear you ask, but let's pretend you did. Because it's a weird old story, isn't it? He's not been here that long. He's got a long time left on his contract. What's the problem? Well, apparently the problem is Tomas Soucek wants more money. Now, what we hear, and this is what 90 Minutes reported, and I think it's fair to say that 90 Minutes are a respected, I guess, generic football outlet, aren't they? They used to be a magazine. Now they're more on the internet. I guess who isn't? But it's a reliable source of information. Maybe not in the know information, but I do find it an interesting article and certainly an interesting avenue to go down to suggest that basically Soucek wants a new contract and the club aren't going to give him one. Now, the details of the situation, I'll read through the article in a second, is that Tomas Soucek, basically his form has been so poor that David Moyes has said, no, I don't want to offer him a new contract now. And I think what it's given us here is a chicken and an egg situation. Because based on last season's performances, certainly his goal-scoring output, I think it's fair to say that Tomas Soucek was probably one of the most coveted players around in the Premier League. Maybe not somebody that Man City or anybody to go for, but I certainly did believe that when I heard him linked with Bayern Munich and teams like that, his goal-scoring output was so good. I was worried. I was concerned. It didn't seem completely ridiculous that Bayern Munich might want Tomas Soucek last season. That's how good he was. And I also looked at it when he was linked with a £60 million move away. That didn't seem ridiculous. Didn't look at it and think 60 million, wow, that seems like a lot for a player. Actually, it seemed about right for a midfielder who could get double figures goals. And that's a bit of a rarity now. I think maybe we were a little bit spoiled in terms of the last few years when you would see Lampard do it, you see Gerrard do it, Paul Scholes do it. By and large, midfielders, I'm not talking attacking midfielders, twisty-turny ones or wingers. I'm talking about central midfielders, box-to-box players, tend not to do double figures in a season. This guy did. So when I saw him linked with the bigger clubs, I thought, OK, yeah, I believe it. However, if the story were to break now, and it hasn't, I'm talking about links with the bigger clubs. If I were to hear today, Bayern Munich are interested in Tomas Soucek for 60 million quid, I think probably not. I couldn't quite see it. And why? Well, because his form has dropped off. Certainly his goal scoring form. Now here's where I find this bit interesting, and it's because this is what I'm saying: the chicken or the egg. Has his form dropped off because he's in crap form and he's not as good as last season? Has his form dropped off because he feels undervalued and he's not trying as hard? Well, I don't think that's the case. I mean, he runs as much as anybody in the Premier League at the moment. I mean, he is just an outstanding player in terms of work rate and commitment. How many times do you look at the stats, the numbers, and when they play 90 minutes, both Soucek and Fornals have run as much, if not more, than anybody else. He's always up in the top 10. So it can't be attitude. It's not like he's doing a sulk and running around and not putting it out there. But I think it's what David Moyes has done to him positionally. And to be fair, I wouldn't particularly want to be in David Moyes' situation on this one, because I think I'd look at it and I'd think, well, Soucek, whilst it's nice to give him a free rein, if for that to happen, then Declan Rice has to take more of a defensive midfield role, right? And then obviously, if we want to keep Rice, got to keep Rice happy. You get the impression that Rice very much sees himself as a box-to-box midfielder. Rice, we spoke about Gerrard earlier, I think Rice may well see himself as that sort of player, somebody that can do a bit of defending, box-to-box, score some goals. And certainly, you look at the way he's been getting himself into goal-scoring positions, it appears to be the case, the way he dribbles, the way he carries the game, the way he switches the play from left to right with long passes. He's a really, really good player. For Declan Rice to do that, Tomas Soucek has to sacrifice some of his natural attacking play. And this is where I think is particularly interesting, because if we believe this article, which basically says David Moyes has said no to Tomas Soucek getting a new contract because Tomas Soucek's out of form, then that becomes a little bit more interesting if we sort of look at it and think, well, maybe David Moyes, you are responsible for the poor form. Now, I'm not looking to stir up trouble, and I hope there isn't any. I hope Tomas Soucek, number one, gets a new contract. I really do, but he's got to earn it. Number two, I actually want him to get back to goal scoring form. I want David Moyes to find a solution. Now, this is the thing. David Moyes might not think that a solution needs to be found. And we don't know. Look, we had a really good season last season. I think there's maybe a tendency this season to think this season won't be as good as last because of the injuries and whatnot. But let's be fair, we don't know. We got a Frankfurt game coming up. It could well end up, it's still well within the realms of possibility, that this season ends up better than last season. And if that happens, who's to say to David Moyes, well, you've got to sort out the Tomas Soucek situation? He may well say, well, there's not one. Because actually, when I tweaked it, when I changed it up, when I swapped the roles around and we allowed Declan a little bit more of an attacking free role and licence, but we curtailed some of Soucek's attacking instincts and made him defend a little bit more, look, it's worked. We've reached a Europa League semi-final. Hopefully he can turn around and say we've reached the Europa League final. Hopefully he can turn around and say, well, we've won the Europa League. At that point, where's the problem? Now, as I understand it, when Tomas Soucek signed, he didn't sign on massive wages. Look, as far as you and I are concerned, it's a lot of money. It's big money. But comparatively, Premier League wages, not so much. I don't think it was on a massive wage for, who was it? It was Slavia Prague. I was getting mixed up. Slavia Prague, Sparta Prague. It was Slavia Prague. I don't think he was on a massive wage there. So when he came over, I couldn't guess what it is. But certainly when you look at, well, forget Yarmolenko, he's leaving. But even Lanzini, I think Lanzini's on about 80 grand a week. Certainly Mikel Antonio's on a lot more than that. There's a lot of players. Zuma came in. As we know, it sort of stirred up a bit of a hornet's nest, didn't it? That Kurt Zuma might be on 125 grand a week. I think he is, by the way. Then Soucek's probably looking at that, and I don't know what he's on, but if he is on, let's say, £40,000 a week, I know it's hard for someone on £40,000 a week, but he's probably looking at it thinking, hold on, I am worth more. And we know, and I know this, to be fair, because I've heard it from leaks from around the club and whatnot, that he was in for contract negotiations. But he's not in a position of strength, because regardless of who you blame for his form dipping, his form has dipped. His output is not as great as last season's. And if that's the case, then where's the incentive for the club to give him a new contract? Because this is the other thing. He's not like Declan Rice, and Declan Rice has a year left on his contract, but we have a 2-year option to extend that. I think you'd probably find Soucek in all honesty, you don't know exactly the details of the deal, but I imagine he's got 3 or 4 years left and possibly options on top of that. He's not in a position of strength. He's not in a position to turn around and say, well, you know, I'm going to be off. Because actually, the fact of the matter is we could probably keep him around for quite a few years on the same wage. Now, I don't think that's a good idea, but I do think some compromise needs to be found here. And it does always worry me when these stories leak out. Because someone's leaking the story. And do I think it's David Moyes leaking that he's not going to give him a new contract? It doesn't really sound like Moyesy, does it? And I don't think it's something that the club would brag about particularly, that, we're not going to give him a new contract at the moment. I do wonder if this has come from the other side. I don't mean Soucek himself, maybe his representatives or something like that. But I do think long-term it is a bit of a worry. I think we've got to get it sorted, but primarily what we got to do is find a situation, before we sort the wages out, find a situation, a solution within the team where Tomas Soucek feels that he's got a role to play that he's happier with. He was happy last season. Last season he was the main man. So is Tomas Soucek happy not being the main man? And then you've got this whole situation with Declan Rice. And I've got to say, I don't believe that Declan Rice is leaving this summer. I think he's got one more, at least, at West Ham. And we don't have to sell him. We don't have to sell any of them. But David Moyes has got to strike a balance, because I think if what I believe to be true is true, that they're both going to be playing central midfield for West Ham next season, David Moyes has got to make them both happy. And then, and only then, will Soucek be happy enough that he'll sign a contract, but David Moyes has got to sanction it. Go on, Moyesy, give him a deal.